My name is Scott Rennick. I'm the owner and the publisher of the Climbing Business Journal. You guys know who we are. We work to empower and inspire the people that work in the climbing space, the climbing industry, especially route setters. I always do this quick spiel about how our founder, Mountain Helt, Mike Helt, at the time, he was a level 5 when he started CBJ. I took over from him about 7 years, going on 7 years ago, and I was an old comp and commercial setter from back in the 90s. So route setting runs deep. And, I firmly believe that like so much of our culture and so much of obviously the product on the wall is driven by route setters. Um, so without further ado, I'll get out of the way and hand it off. It's a real privilege to work with Foxman and Justin at Vortex. I became aware of them when they were presenting their data a couple summits ago, back like 3 summits ago or something. They do this awesome service to our community, collecting route setter compensation and workplace information. You can see that they publish it for free at vortexroutesetting.com. I'm After 30 years in the industry, I love people that give back and do the hard work of like collecting data and sharing it. So there's a special place in my heart for Justin and Foxman. And as route setters, both of them deeply experienced. They both run crews at multiple for chains that have multiple locations. So they really know what it's like to be in your shoes. And I think it's a privilege to work with you guys. So I'll back out. Thanks for being here. Hand it over to you.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, we should probably introduce our other guest. Many of you probably know who he is, but it's John Muse, the chief of sport at USA Climbing. He oversees the high performance and events department. Previous to that role, I knew you, John, when you owned Stone Moves back in Texas. I did my first L1 with you, and so we figured you would be one of the perfect people to start talking about how to grow in the USAC circuit as a route setter. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we've got a few people in this call who've been on these before. And so you'll know, we usually start off with a little spiel about we're here to talk about, some problems in the industry, but stay solution based. We found pretty early on that left to our own devices, we as route setters can kind of doom spiral pretty easily. And so I offer, if I'm ever in your town and you want to just complain about the thing that we're talking about today, we'll go out and we'll get a beer and we can complain. But this particular moment is for finding some solutions, kind of like staying positive and, solving stuff as best we can. If it were easily solved, we would have already done it and we wouldn't be here having this conversation. But we're going to do our very best. And we got good people here to help suss through it. So I usually lay out the problems pretty fast early on because we already know what they are. We don't need to spend a bunch of time on them. So I think one of the biggest ones is it's easy to feel frustrated when you're applying for positions or clinics. So we all have a story of I wasn't chosen. So I'm getting that out of the way early. And then the process takes a lot of time. And for a lot of route setters, we can feel like there's that time crunch of like, well, how am I going to get this done before it's too late to get it done? So again, we all know that we've got kind of like a ticking time clock on our bodies. So kind of getting that out of the way early. So with those problems, over there, we wanted to open early to have you guys toss questions that you have in the chat for right now. We've got some like pre-set up questions. And we want to make sure that we're actually answering what you guys want to hear. So we're going to kind of move through some stuff first. And then if we get to your question organically, sick. And if we don't, then it'll be in the chat. So yeah, what are y'all looking to learn? Put in the chat. Justin, want to start with some questions?
Sure. So we preloaded a couple. I'll just kind of high level overview them and then we can kind of feel out where we want to start. First question, how do you get started route setting and USAC? And I think, we can kind of I'd love to hear how John got started. We can share how Fox and I got started. Do you want me to list them all, Fox, or do you want to just go after it?
It's going to start with the first one.
Okay, let's just dive in. I'm kind of curious, John, how did you get started in, because you were a gym owner, did you route set beforehand? Paint us a picture of your route setting journey and how you ended up in USAC.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll just start in the very beginning if that's all right. Back
Mhm.
in, I don't know, 1999 or 2000 was when I first got my first trip to the climbing facility in a small town in Lafayette, Louisiana. And from there, I was hooked, man. It was like math for me. It was problem solving. It was something that I couldn't get enough of and was in the gym every day after work from then on with a buddy of mine. Soon thereafter, my wife and I started coaching the climbing team in that facility. And then that was where I kind of got my start in USA climbing. Eventually, I was a regional coordinator. Um, I was a volunteer, wore many hats even at that time in my life. And then we decided to move to Houston, Texas and open a climbing gym called Stone Moves in 2004. I had said a little bit prior to that, but certainly once we opened the facility, I mean, if you're in a small gym, and even some ways these days, a lot of us wear many hats still, working in facilities. And so I was a primary setter there, and really started turning wrenches, and heard about this clinic thing in 2008, and took the first ever level 2 clinic in route setting, and that was done by Mountain Health and Chris Danielson at the time, and then I got my first opportunity to set a national championship event that year as well. I am a fortunate byproduct of an early time in the setting industry when there wasn't many of us. You know, we were all vying for the national championship. That was what we wanted to set for. And now, gosh, look at where setting has come. You can actually make a career out of it. And as we'll discover in this, I'm sure, and talk through some of the pain points here, it's become quite challenging to move move through the system now because there's so many great setters out there, right? So in 2008 and then forward of that, I had the privilege of setting a number of national championship events, became a national chief setter, started instructing clinics, um, and then eventually I mean, in the setting world, I got to do everything and more of what I ever thought I would get to from a setting perspective in the events that I got to work. And I tried to use that expertise along with all the other hats that I had played with in USA Climbing, all the while wanting to work full time for the organization. And then in 2016, finally got that opportunity where it just aligned with myself and my family to start working for the organization full time. I stopped setting at that point in time. I still instructed some clinics, but quickly after I started working full time for the organization, my own personal setting went away, and I was excited about the next opportunity for me to be able to influence the industry that I came from and that I'm still passionate about to this day.
This is exactly why I wanted to ask that question. 'Cause, like, I feel like, I've heard, people who were like, oh, wow, I didn't know all of the experience that John Muse has because you've been just, for a lot of younger setters, a fixture. I had no idea that you were in RC before you were route setting, which is like such a cool thing to me. Like, as we have conversations with different people, one of the recurring topics that comes up is like, well, how can I make myself, a more suitable applicant for management, or like a better candidate for this or this or this? And the thing that keeps coming up is like, learn all of the skills, wear all of the hats. And I think that that's like a really good example of, like, I'm sure when you started as an RC, you didn't have a plan to work full time, but all of that does accumulate. You start to like gain more empathy for all of the different roles that individuals play within a system. So that's really
Yeah, it was a pipe dream then, Foxman. I mean, honestly, back in 2008 when I actually started setting, to think that there might be an opportunity to work for the organization that I had devoted a lot of my own personal volunteer time in, and sweat and blood, tears, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, to have that come to realization in 2016 was a dream come true.
that's very cool. Yeah. Oh gosh. Sorry, I got like distracted because I got really, I'm like, oh dang, I didn't know that. Um, yeah, so I've got a big question here. And I guess if you had to pick a single thing that you wish route setters knew as they were applying, at any stage of the process, what would that be? What do you wish more people knew?
Hmm. Well, I guess now just knowing that you need to be patient with the process that you're about to about to undergo, but seeing it through is also important. And then the more that you put yourself out there and work in diverse environments, makes you a more appealing candidate for sure as you try to move up through the program.
So I think something that I would love to hear more about, like your views on, is like the concept of diverse environments. I had an amazing experience at my last championship level event. I'd worked in a lot of different places, a lot of different regions, divisions with a lot of different chiefs. And then I had the opportunity to work with a chief who didn't share the same kind of like setting lineage that I had. And I hadn't thought so much before that moment of, I did a lot of setting at Justin's gym in Texas, where I also like interacted with Kenny Benson and then Morgan Young. I've also like we hadn't worked events together, but we'd worked around the same people a whole bunch of times. And so our styles, it was always easy to like step in and be like, I know what Kenny will like. And then I had a great experience working with Roy and Dan Cornella, and they have a very different style. And I never considered that not just the location and not just the different people, but the different styles that people are bringing in. How do you find that? Because
Yeah.
I couldn't have found it if I didn't know it until I experienced it.
Yeah, it's tough because in some ways it takes your own from your own commitment. There's obviously a financial commitment in the beginning that you kind of have to be willing to absorb. And had I just stayed in Houston, Texas, and always just sat there, I would have never gained the experience that is necessary to try and become a national route setter. So it takes and I completely recognize and admit that it's not as easy as it is now, as it's not as easy now as it was back then trying to get these opportunities because there are so many qualified and great setters out there. But putting yourself out there and asking for opportunities, even if it's at your own expense, while we hate that that's something that you end up having to do, it helps. So you reach out to setters in other parts of the U.S. At their events so that you can go and set with them to your point of learning a different style. For myself, in 2008 when I had that first opportunity, well, actually, yeah, when I took the level 2 clinic, my mind was blown at things out there. I mean, gosh, there were drills that had adapters on the end of them that you could spin bolts into the wall with, and I had just been using hand tools this whole time. And the first national championship event that I went to, my eyes were again wide open with the types of movement that could be on the wall. And I'll bring it back even to the most simplest term. Everyone looks at a hold in a circle, right? And I'm sure you've heard this if you've ever been a part of a clinic or anything, but there's 360 degrees of possibilities within one single hold on the wall that can change how a climber and setter's interaction with the movement on the wall takes place. And in 2008, when I took that clinic and was told that one little statement, wow, it just blew my mind and what I could do on the wall with just manipulating the holds. And sure, I had been doing that all along, right? But watching these other setters and how they approached hold selection and the movements that they were creating on the wall, and I started creating an inventory of moves and videos associated with them from that day forward, with all the names, and they've gotten beyond even what I was doing nowadays. I don't even know if I know some of the names that people were calling the movements out there, but that was fun. That was like my experience and how I tried to increase my repertoire of movements and gain more experience that I could bring back to Houston, Texas, and try to increase and extend what we were doing in Texas. And certainly for my own climbing team that I was still coaching at the time, I was bringing national route setting and that environment back to them, right? And then indirectly, I met people along the way, and I had some opportunities and was in the right place at the right time in some instances, I'm sure. And if I mean, I feel like I was a pretty good setter back then, to not to toot my own horn, but I certainly wouldn't be where I am to this day if I wasn't, I didn't bring some talent to the equation.
Yeah. So I guess I'm curious for the people who are in the room, um, the concept of cold calling for competitions or even just guest setting. Do you guys have any, like, I feel like that got a lot more difficult recently. Do you guys do that? Have you guys, like, I'm just curious. So I'm like asking this in a really awkward way. I apologize, but I feel like a lot of my opportunities came from me just not caring. And I would just call every gym from a town I was visiting, be like, hey, can I come guest it? And especially like 10 years ago, people were like, sure. Uh, and I know that's gotten a lot harder for a lot of people now, but I also know that people are still doing it. So that's kind of my question to you guys. Are you doing that? Who's doing that? This is that awkward moment on Zoom calls that I'm always like,
I'll make another comment on that just to help spur people's maybe some thoughts. But one of the things that's become more challenging with cold calling is a lot of the corporate gyms these days have rules and regs around having guest setters. You almost have to be on staff to be able to set in those worlds now. So it is that even that's gotten more challenging now.
yeah. I'm curious if people like have ways around that because that just opened random doors for me. Like I just visited a friend yesterday who I cold called his gym. It was, well, what was it? It was Earth Checks at the time, but there's no way you can cold call movement these days.
But
But
you could
also,
try.
you can check.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I don't know. Seems like a thumbs down for many.
Yeah, I don't cold call anymore, or really at all. I never really did. But I would like talk to people at events, and that's how I'd make the connection to then reach out to them. But I get emails a lot, not so much phone calls, but emails a lot from people, but way less than I used to. Um,
Yeah, you feel like that slowed down? Because yeah, I remember I would get like anytime we hosted even QEs, it was just
yeah,
like
I mean, I and my gyms are hosting 3 QEs this season, and I've gotten one setter who didn't know we were related and sent both the gyms a cold email. But it's just one route setter versus it used to be probably 5 or 10 emails.
what do you think has changed?
Um, I think it's partially the like understanding that it wouldn't happen, or it's very unlikely that it would happen. Um, and then I think part of it is just like gyms aren't hiring out as much, if at all. Um, and so I think there's a lot of discouragement in the industry about guest setting. Um, so that personally is at least how I feel, and how a lot of people I know feel, is that just it doesn't feel possible anymore. Um,
Yeah.
and or it's financially unavailable, because gyms either don't provide, or certain gyms don't provide professional development opportunities, or if even if they do, there's still then the legal requirements that we've talked about on many different discussions. And so it just becomes such this web that most gyms are like, I'm not going to do that. So their straight answer is just no, or no responses. I mean, I've called head setters who I have like a relationship with to ask questions, and I just get cold responses, cold shoulders. So it's
If that was ever me, I'm really sorry.
no, no. It's just interesting. Like it feels like there's um, a relationship with route setters who will try and help each other out more individually, but once companies get involved, it becomes a lot more complex, and so then that's where things get messy. So lots of route setters will do whatever they can for someone, but if it has to work through the company, then it's not necessarily even the head setter's choice.
Yeah. Yeah. How about, is anybody else experiencing like similar things? Have you reached out for competitions or do you get applications for your competitions? from people who are interested in just gaining more experience?
I can maybe talk through my experiences and then someone else can chime in. But um, the gym that I'm currently working for doesn't do a ton of comps and events. But when we do, I pretty regularly get either emails or calls or what have you. Um, and the organization that I'm a part of is one of the ones that, requires an onboarding of some sort. For guest setting, which isn't necessarily like a deal breaker, but it is a hurdle because we have to have like the accounting or the HR department like go through some paperwork and do a bunch of onboarding tasks rather than just like your old school sort of like contract work. And so that puts a barrier of entry onto it for sure. I also think that now, like comparing my experience, I had a similar sort of trajectory as yours, John, where like I feel like I went through the levels earlier on, not quite as early as you, but it was definitely a little bit easier because I would just pop all over the place. And the opportunity for that, um, when you send an email to someone and you're like, hey, I want to do this thing, nowadays I feel like more gyms are more capable of doing these events fully in-house. And I don't know if that was not true back then, but it's definitely seemingly more true where an event like an organization might not sign up to do an event if they don't feel like they have the team to support it. Um, and so I think because of that, maybe there's a little bit less of that too. It's like you're adding these barriers of entry. So I think my interest is like if that is already harder, there already is more competition at the circuit. Like, is there any sort of rubric or any sort of like guidance that you might be able to provide this group that kind of like might give them some sort of actionables or some sort of direction that they can hit if they're like kind of striking out in their own way? That's like how do they do it in-house if that's sort of like the biggest way or the best way they can see fit?
How do they, I don't understand your question clearly, Justin, but how do they gain more experience in-house, or how,
Well,
as an in-house setter, are they going to make themselves more of an appealable candidate if they're applying for another level of certification?
yeah. Well, so when we were talking in the planning call, we were talking about like the rubric. Um, I'm wondering if you could shed light into sort of what that is
Sure.
and how it's used.
Yeah, I guess most that are on the call would know somewhat about the clinic certification program within USA Climbing on the basis at level 1 through level 5. And there's a lot of intermediary endorsements and certifications between most of the levels these days. But you take your level 1 clinic, which is an open first come first serve entry point. There's some minimal requirements that we ask the setters to meet before taking a level 1 clinic. But for all points and purposes, you can take it if you have minimal setting experience. But when you get to the level 2, it's a pretty sought after and still very competitive application process. Um, and at the end of every level 2 clinic, we're putting through another 10 individuals into the pipeline that are vying for the next level of certification. But when looking at the level 2 applicants, the rubric is still pretty much the same as it was whenever I was chiefing clinics, level 2 clinics back in the day. But you're looking at, well, how many times has this setter applied? Because that's now a big thing. Some people probably applied 3 or 4 times now to a level 2, maybe some cases more than that, and still haven't gotten in. What region are they from? What type of references do they have is super important, like who they've worked with. Have you worked outside of your own environment, like we talked about earlier? Have you had the opportunity to work in other states with other organizations? And back to the whole level 4, level 5 references. Who have you worked with, and what kind of reference are they giving you in your application for the level 2 clinic? We also look at championship event experience. Have you worked as part of a team, whether from a volunteer standpoint or an actual member of a regional and divisional championship? Um, if have you had any sort of head setting experience at a local competition? And then back to the region thing, like what is the need in that region for setters of that level of certification? For example, if you're coming out of Colorado and that's where you're setting, it's very hard to kind of move through the system in its early stages because there's so many setters in Colorado. Just using that as an example, right? That is still something that's looked at.
So where can people find that information? Because I know
Right.
I was looking for exactly that before this call, and I was kind of going through, and I was able to find, the route setting resources. What did I pull up?
Yeah, you bring up you're heading into a great point here, and something that we've identified as a big improvement that USA Climbing can make to help from a transparency standpoint and everyone understanding what the path of a route setter really looks like. The rubric isn't something that I've seen published on our page, but something that I've asked for it to be there. It is something, well, at least it used to, I don't know where we're at now, but it is something that was shared um, with applicants at one time if they weren't selected or if they were asking about what can I do to better my 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 odds at getting into the next level too when I applied. And then a rubric of sorts was shared with them to you need to gain more experience here, gain more experience there. And look, to be fair here and completely honest, and not every time is that going to work. You might go out and work your bones off volunteering for X, Y, and Z setters and still not get accepted into the level 2 clinic. It is an ever evolving process to try and continue to improve it. But transparency and publishing some of this stuff on the website is definitely an area of improvement that we need to address in USA Climbing.
Yeah, well, I think I'm like a great case example too. Like I'm a very literal person. So when I didn't get selected for, I think, the level 2, I'm immediately like, how can I do better? And I send an email and like, how can I do better? And then I get the rubric back. But I, for one, and I think this is like just a me being, again, sometimes a little bit dense and overly literal. I read it and it's like, okay, you should work more championship level events. And I'm like, biscuits, I've worked a whole bunch, like more than people who got accepted. And then you should work with lots of different people. I'm like, ah, nutters. But I've done that too. And I know people who didn't work many. When really, like, at least for me, direct feedback, I'm great at it. And so without knowing that that was like the rubric of here's what like the standard of what we're looking for, I was like, but this doesn't apply to me. The thing that applies to me is I'm not terribly fit. Ah, got it. So I think that like you raised a great point. If it's like available on the website as like this is the standard, at least for me, that would be like I would have read that much more easily than the like where I'm like, ah, biscuits. I worked more events and I still didn't get in. Nuts.
I remember back like earlier in my career, I was working in New England, and fortunately I was working for a gym that did a bunch of like championship level events, so I got a whole bunch of experience. And so I remember going through this application process and being rejected, but asking why, and they were like, "Oh, we need you to have more experience." And I was like, "I have a ton." But it was all within like the island of one organization. And so, it was a fortunate thing for me because I was able to do all these events, but it was also these blinders where the moment I went to go do an event outside of the region, I was like, oh, wow, similar to your like, you're using impact drivers moment. It was just like, oh, you're doing that. Oh, you're doing this. And then I started taking all this information back to the gym and I was like, oh, this makes sense. I need to do more of this. And I think it's great when you can, but there's definitely an investment. Not everyone's capable of just like upping and fronting it, whatever it costs to go to California or Colorado or whatever. But I think that's not unique to other industries, right? If you want to go be an apprentice tattoo artist, it's like you got to like I don't even know the process, so I'm not gonna continue that. But it's like I know there's definitely like some buy-in there, right? Like,
yeah, y'all both raised good points about feeling as if you checked boxes and still weren't getting in. And in both cases, it seems like there was a reconciliation, at least with where you were kind of your deficit, so to speak. And I think that's another area where we can do better in USA Climbing, and I've tried to press upon our head setters and certainly our new program manager about just the hard, direct conversations that we have to have sometimes with setters that are continuing to apply. And if we know that there's a deficit, then we have to be transparent and forthcoming to that setter, even though it's a tough conversation to have. And either they at least give them the opportunity to correct that challenge. And then if they can't, then they at least know why they aren't getting selected anymore.
Yeah, I don't think that's not an entirely on the organization thing. I think that's a societal thing too, where like we as people need to be able to hear that feedback
Mhm.
and not be a problem about it. Like assuming that everybody who is applying for USAC events is an adult human, sometimes hard feedback is part of life. And so having worked in management in a number of different situations, like having been a person, sometimes receiving hard feedback is really hard. But if I disagree with it, I always have to take the viewpoint of somebody is giving me this feedback because they think they need to give it to me. So whether I agree with it or not, somebody felt like it was worth saying. And I feel like route setters can very easily, like within our little bubbles of our gyms, be like, I am awesome and everybody loves my routes. I'm really good at this stuff. And
Yeah.
so being able to like set that aside and know that you are like probably a very fine route setter and you didn't get selected for this event because of whatever reason, having the transparency about the reason and then the opportunity to grow. I think it's very much a two-sided street. Like it has to go both ways. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think that there are many route setters that I know who, now that I'm running a slightly larger team, people have been rejected for this or that, and they express frustration to me. They're like, "Hey, I didn't get chosen," and then I'm like, "Okay, well, did you reach out to ask what you could be doing differently?" And they're like, "No." What?
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Okay, well, maybe you should," because like getting frustrated is a valid response, but also like figuring out what the reason is so that you can then put some effort into that and try again next time is also like sort of on the route setter. Um, so I think it works both ways. Like you have to be asked so that USAC could
Yeah.
provide.
Yeah, these days it's hard. You'll have to find a way to set yourself apart from the rest of the group. Like I mentioned earlier, now there are so many talented setters in the pool that we have to choose from, and it's like in any other aspect of the of sports. And I hate to draw this kind of analogy here, but because we're not this big, but in our microcosm, it kind of feels like you go from a high school sport and you want to play a college sport where everyone in your high school is really good or everyone in the state's really good and gets selected to be able to play college sports. You might not get selected, and then even less so if you're looking to play above and beyond college, in the pros. So if we can take that small analogy now, I think our setter pool has become quite talented. And to go from the level 2 to level 3 to level 4, setting yourself apart, finding ways that you can contribute to the team in ways that stand out, being that team player, doing the grunt work and not complaining and whatever it takes uh, to just be a part of that team, to find a way to set yourself apart from everybody else.
Yeah, there's a few people that I will always hire for events only because when shit was hitting a fan, they just they did the thing. Like nobody had to ask them to clean the floor. They just did it. Like little things that we all like it's sometimes it's being able to pull many double digits, which is huge. And sometimes it's the person who like notices, a screw missing. Like thank you. So yeah, like I don't know. Those people stick out to me in my brain. It's like if I can trust that you'll come and be a positive experience, like I always want to work with you.
Yeah. And then if once you are selected, make sure that you don't waste the opportunity. Come prepared and fit. There's a thing that's becoming a huge priority in these selections is how fit are the setters? Can they climb and do the work necessary to set for the athletes? a lot of setters these days are not showing up in the fittest way, and it's showing. It's really it's going to affect their ability to continue to get jobs.
Yeah. That's a question that like I've always been interested in. There's an email that I got forwarded to me, I don't know, a year ago, 2 years ago. I don't know what time is, but specifically like laying out that like show up fit, like make sure that you can do the job. And I reached out to a few friends. I feel like I've been very lucky in my events where it hasn't felt like it's been a problem. Um, and I am almost always the least strong person on a team. And I felt like at those events, the Chiefs used me really well to like meter the low end. I climb a lot like a, like kind of medium junior girl. And so at some events, that's really helpful. And it didn't feel like a problem, but we also had a very diverse setting team. And I think that was really, that's what made it possible. Where if it was a team of just me, it's a lot harder. Whereas we had a team that could climb all the way to the top. And so having somebody who could just like check that bottom was not a bad thing. But if we didn't have that range above me, I think it would have been quite challenging. But also reading that email was like that moment of like, well, okay, I'll try. I'll try real hard.
I think the overall strength level of athletes over the last, let's say, 10 years, if not longer, has just gone up, right? And so the physical asks of the route setters is also going up, right? Yeah, I can remember some of the first regionals that I was setting, what we're being set for each category at those events relative like to what they're being set at now, completely different. Um, and so yeah, scale that up to national levels, even beyond. It's like there's a significant output ask. Um,
So I want to check in real quick. We haven't had any questions tossed into chat. Are we answering the questions that you guys want answered? Because you probably came here with, at least question marks in your brains. Are we hitting those? Is there anything that you want to ask while we're here?
Well, I'll ask. We've touched on it a bit, but I think it'd be great to get some more specifics of. We've been talking about finding ways to like diversify ourselves or like showcase ourselves, not waste the opportunity, be helpful when we're at comps. But this selection process is paper based, and it's resume based. So when you're saying like find a way to make yourself stand out, how do you do that on a piece of paper? And then kind of tied to that is the references. When there are so few level 4 and 5s and so few of them that still set that you can still find an opportunity to set with outside of USAC events that are hard to get into, how would you recommend you get that experience with them to showcase what can't be shown on paper?
Yeah, so the paper trail comes back to your references. I think they're duly tied together. Being able to, if you're just looking to apply for a level 2, it's unlikely that you've worked with a large number of level 4s, let alone level 5 setters in the industry. But even level 3s, if you have a setter that's respected in the industry that's providing a positive reference on you, and they're speaking to your work ethic, they're speaking to your talent and putting creative movement on the wall, your climbing ability, and you have multiples of those types of references, that's a way to stand out on paper for sure.
John, I'm kind of curious, in like today's age with like so many people being able to scroll and do a little bit of deep diving on Instagram, like uh are like people who are posting videos of them sending boulders, whether they be indoors or outdoors, like are those sort of mediums being tapped into, or are those like recommendations you might make for avenues where it's like, hey, I've never heard of this route setter. Let me like find them on Instagram and like oh wow, they just like did this V12 outside. Like, okay, I guess they can hang.
Hmm.
Like, is that a factor, do you think?
I don't know, and just in complete honesty, I'd have to check in with the instructors out there and our program manager to see if they are utilizing any social media posts that these applicants are putting out there. It is an interesting concept, though. I know that this happens, to use my previous analogy in the sports world. If you're trying to make yourself marketable, you're certainly getting videos and you're putting it out on social media. You're trying to show those coaches, your stats and what you can do. And it seems reasonable to think that a similar avenue could be applied to route setting.
I
But
only ask, I'm terrible at it.
yeah,
So like
but that covers one basis, right? That might cover in the paper scenario, that would cover a basis of, well, is this individual that's applying, do they have the right level? Can they climb? Can they rock climb the level of difficulty that we're looking out there? And so that checks that box, but I may not check that other box of, well, how well does this individual work on a team? The true essence behind that individual from someone else that's worked with them.
well, anyone else have any other questions?
I always try to leave like extra long pauses because the whole Zoom like audio on, audio off is a little bit funny, but I'm just going to assume that we are getting all of your USAC questions answered. You're going to walk away from this and be like, I understand and feel great. It's my assumption. Well, if you have a question, either raise your hand or interrupt or toss it in the chat. I would love to know, John, where would you like to see USAC evolve into the future? Like what are goals, hopes, dreams? Like you've been with the organization for a minute now, right? What do you want to see?
Well, hopefully it's not a sore subject, but we have this impending new national training center that we're trying to build here in Salt Lake City, and I would love to see that come to fruition because my belief is that that facility is going to provide a lot of opportunity for coaching and setting and learning and education and all of that. So for me, at least now at this point in my career at USA Climbing, aside from all the high performance and making sure we're doing great by our athletes and continuing on the pathway for them from a youth athlete all the way up to the Olympics, would be this national training center and how that can contribute and put us at another level of competitiveness within the world of climbing.
It's funny, I just had an RC tell me about how the venue needs to be better. So I'm sure that they would agree that that would be a really nice thing for the athletes to have for the high levels of competition that y'all are hosting and just for the training too.
Yeah. There's nothing that takes away, though, from the grassroots of where it all comes from, right? Setting starts at its base level in your home gym. Coaching a youth athlete starts in a home gym somewhere. And then we eventually, hopefully, at some point in their lives, get to affect maybe some different level of performance or different education component related to route setting. So I won't discount where it comes from, that's for sure.
So at this juncture, what's your favorite part of being like a part of the USAC competition scene?
I kind of stated it in part of my intro about myself and where I came from. It's being able to shape what we do, being one of those individuals in our organization that gets to help make decisions and define where the industry is going and dealing with our international federation. Um, so yeah, I mean, back to some of your comments a moment ago, Foxman, about what are the questions that these setters that are on the call may have, or even some that may listen to this call afterwards. I would always like to think of myself as very open. So if the questions aren't coming out now, I would happily field any questions that any setter has personally, and if I can't answer it, we'll put them in the right avenue for getting that right answer.
Yeah, no, that's super appreciated. You've always been like a person that I reach out to if I have a question that I can't get answered elsewhere. And you've always been that person for me where it's like, I don't know who to ask. So thank you. I know I sent you a lot of emails, so I appreciate it. Um, Something that we talked about a little bit. So like a behind the curtain thing, guys, we prepare a little bit for these. Just, shocking, I know, but we meet with everybody who comes on these talks just to figure out what we're going to talk about. And something that came up in the prep call was just ways to become more involved. So John, something that you had mentioned was becoming involved with the organization beyond even just as a route setter. Can you talk about some of the ways people can do that?
Yeah, there's, I don't know the exact number offhand, but there's always opportunities within our committees, whether it's a judge committee or route setting committee or coaches committee. There are a variety of different committees that we have that we love to have experienced setters on some of those committees, if not all of them. Volunteering and just your local organization whenever they're having competitions is always very helpful. We're a volunteer-driven organization. If we didn't have volunteers, we would not exist. I can promise you that because we can't afford to pay everybody to judge our comps, nor could we pay everybody to set our comps. So I would, yeah, any avenue. That's where I came from was volunteering. I started out volunteering my time within the organization, and I've just had the privilege of continuing to move up within it.
Yeah, I for anybody who's on the call, if you haven't worked directly with RCs or judged, I actually actively volunteered to judge this last season, which was new for me. I had some free time and I'm like, well, yeah, I can do that. It's a great time. Like I'd been pulled in before, but it was always like, we need somebody now. And that's a very different vibe than rather than like, I've got a free Saturday, I'll go do something. Um, but yeah, like knowing that the RCs are all volunteer and um I've met a few who are involved with the organization who like don't have kids in climbing. Like I think that to me is like the classic is like, okay, my kid is doing this thing, I will become a volunteer coordinator to like help. There's people who just really care about the sport and the organization who give back in that way. And so I don't know, it seems to me like volunteering is hard because we're all tired and busy and it's hard to give time, but it's also one of the best ways, in my experience, to become involved with something that you care about. And if you're willing to give your time, to USAC in multiple roles, you'll learn more about the organization and I don't know, maybe shape the direction it's going in. Question mark. Yeah. I'm gonna put out just like a last call for questions.
I'll throw another one out there.
Adam, let's go.
um, we started this call kind of talking about it, and I feel like we talked about how everyone's feeling the struggle of opportunity through USAC. So I would love to know what either USAC is doing or planning on doing or would like to do to help push or provide those opportunities for experience for setters at the different levels outside of, the forever hard to get internships and comp placements and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the setting committee and the program manager are always looking at ways and avenues where we can reasonably increase those opportunities in the right way. One of the things we identified, even just with the level two and how some ways it's been restructured and what we're providing at it. We thought at one time you come out of a level two and you can immediately go chief a regional championship. Well, that's not really the case anymore. So level twos have been redesigned a bit with more of a focus on chiefing or head setting a local competition, right? So what are the ways that we can foster and educate the setters in the right way to make them more prepared for those events that they're going to eventually go and set instead of just coming out of a clinic environment? So one thing that we're looking at is maybe having a regional championship where we provide the setting team. And by way of us providing the setting team, we're providing a clinic opportunity as part of a regional championship where you've got 4 or 5 setters that come to participate in the regional championship along with our instructors who are technically the head setters of that particular event. But there's an instructional component associated with actually working a regional championship, which I think is, as we all know, that learned environment is going to go much more further than just coming to a clinic with 10 other individuals and trying to learn what you can about movement and competition route setting and all of that stuff. So that's just one thing. I mean, if you have ideas or areas you think that are possible to create additional opportunities like that, feel free to email me. I'll happily entertain those and even pass them along to our setting committee.
One
Thank you.
one thought I have, John, it's not maybe in the same vein fully, but it's something that I've thought about as, you think about the pool of setters being so big and the pool of opportunities, meaning events, has not grown maybe in the same sort of ratio. But, as more athletes come onto the scene, as climbing becomes more popular, have you, is there what is there a tipping point, or at how close to a tipping point are we where, you know, increasing the number of regions, increasing the number of divisions, that kind of thing, where organically that ends up yielding the need for more Kiwis, the need for more regionals, which then turns into more events for gyms and or for route setters. Like, I don't know what those numbers would be, or if we're anywhere close to them, but
In some regions, we might be nearing a breakout again, where we would split it into another region. But if we're looking at the participation among in the region, around the 400, 500 mark, and how they qualify to the regional championship, it would have to exceed that quite a bit before we would start to look at another region. But it's certainly it's a direct and easy avenue to increase opportunity. You saw that happen when we went from eight divisions to 9 divisions. That increased that by an additional division, which included 2 additional regions and all those additional events that came along with it. There's a lot of costs associated with that too, that comes out of the organization, where we got to have regional championships now in that new area, another divisional championship. That's, site fees and other resources that we have to find, and to some degree that comes by way of an increased participation, within that particular area. But it's not always like a one-to-one aspect.
well, I know there are some regions that struggle to find host gyms to put on these events too. So like additional events doesn't necessarily mean better, right? Because then, there's the maybe an increased pain point of like trying to make sure there's enough host gyms in that region.
Yeah.
So it's not as clean as just like, oh yeah, do more.
Yeah, it's a catch-22 in some ways. The host pushing back on, and even regional coordinators to some degree, and the level by which the event now runs, and trying to reduce the resources necessary to run some of these qualifying events. When you start to reduce the resources or requirements necessary to run these events, well, then gyms no longer really need to employ or bring in this type of a certified setter to set their event. So you indirectly start to decrease some of these opportunities, or these opportunities for experience that we were talking about earlier. So it's a fine balance, and trying not to take us in the wrong direction, where we really take a bunch of back steps.
Yeah, it's complicated for sure.
I do have a question, so I'm going to interrupt as gym manager. I luckily have 4 total in this whole chat, route setters for Planet Rocker here. I'm going to ask a question on, it's kind of a two-parter, but it's more because we are 3 location gym group now, but in a desert in Michigan, where there's literally barely any competition in our backyard. We depend very heavily on our regular commercial route setters to set for our comps, right? So does USA Climbing have any plans or anything in the works to have resources for one, setting just QE level comps? So when we use our general resources, our general route setter resources to set for our comps, is there something that they can look to help give them tips and tricks, whether it's a like a link to videos and like because the trends are changing dramatically overnight, and our route setters aren't at comps, our coaches are at comps, and our coaches are trying to convey all of the new moves and techniques to our route setters, and it doesn't always translate through that method. But I'm wondering if there could be better tools or resources for one, just regular QEs, and two, even just training, right? Because we're constantly asked as a commercial gym to set comp routes for our team, and our team is excellent. Like I think I forget me if I'm wrong, but we got fifth in the country or something like that this year. So like we're doing something right, but we need to do more as a commercial gym. But like at the same time, like you're asking the same people who are setting a diverse set of routes at any given moment, whether it's for a beginner or a youth program kid to an experienced like outdoor trad climber, right? Like how do we fit comp climbing into our normal setting, and what resources do we go to? Because it seems like we just have to look at YouTube videos or Instagram or whatever's out there, and you're expecting this workload to be on the individual route setter to go seek out these videos, as opposed to having a tool that they can just gravitate towards and know that this is the tool USA Climbing says, this is the kind of style of routes that we're setting now. This is what you can expect at the championship level. This is what you should be setting at the QE level. Just a little bit more guidance, I think, is needed.
Yeah, so let me take a stab at your two questions or comments there. One being just the guidelines. And we have some resources that are available that should be sent out to the setters. In instances where we have local qualifying events that are set that don't have maybe a level 2 setter, there's some guidelines that are generally provided to the whoever's going to be designated as the head setter of that event to read through to make sure that they're kind of understanding a USA Climbing comp and some things to look out for. But if you're not seeing that, then that tells me also back to earlier points that we're not providing that in the best way or the most public way or easily accessible way as possible. So that's an area where we can certainly improve and do better. Um, to the other part where you have an environment where you've got a strong team and maybe the setters are not as capable of setting some of the comp style movements. I'll just refer back to how I did it whenever I was coming up. I did have the opportunity to start to explore and go set nationally, but even before that I was researching, kind of looking at what is some movement that's out there. Then I would try to mimic that movement on my on our climbing walls at our local facility in Houston, Texas. And then I would try to set that movement, that same exact movement, and force it for every youth category that was out there because all the sizing is different, right? And that was just for one specific move. Maybe I'm trying to make all of my 11 and under kids have to jump across from one object to another without being able to reach it because you have the tallest kid. So what's the fair, functional, and fun way to make that happen, right? So I still believe to this day that a lot of social media can help setters that are, and not that your setters aren't motivated, so don't take this the wrong way, but a very motivated setter that's really interested in learning movement. I mean, even if I was still setting today, I would be watching all the World Cup videos and trying to recreate that movement that my team is seeing and trying to do it in different ways, different holds, to provide that type of style for them. But from your second part, I feel like I've got something that I'm going to take back to our team internally, to our program manager and even our committee. Maybe there's some more visual tools that we can create that says, hey, this is a lache move. Hey, this is something as basic as a drop knee, and some things to consider when you're setting this type of movement would be some great homework. And maybe out of that would be a good repertoire of movements that we'd have a video library of for setters that are interested in just quickly researching what X is and then being able to experiment with it at their local climbing facility.
That would be super helpful because I know speed is now light years ahead in any other discipline when it comes to online footage, right? And like
Yep.
how every single move, but that's just a static thing that never changes. So like, but like speed climbing has so many tools now out there. It would be really nice if there was something else for competitive climbing just because it's so far removed from traditional rock climbing now that like, unless you have a parkour or gymnastics or some sort of like background in like dynamic movement, it's a little harder for setters to conceptualize this when you're following the traditional, Yosemite decimal scale or, your V scale. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
add on too, there's a number of route setters who are able to come out to your facility too. It becomes an expense, but there are a lot of people who have a wealth of USAC experience who can come like work with your team and like provide like that talk of like cold calling and going around. You can do it in reverse. And it's like a little bit different because for me at least going to like a new facility with brand new holds and brand new people, it's like a little injection of creativity. But you can do that in reverse and bring somebody in to teach a clinic for your team, specifically for that. And I mean, there's USAC hosting clinics as well. I don't know if your gym has looked into that at all, but
we did
provide.
the level one with Cody. I don't remember his last name, but he's the level 5. So
Grotsky.
Yeah.
yeah. But that was a little taste, right? But
Yeah, no, the more you can provide opportunities for your team to like be exposed to those different styles, especially if you're in an area where it's harder to like travel around and even just go climb at other gyms, that can be a really good way to provide that exposure.
And it's definitely a lot more cost effective to bring an instructor to you rather than like sending 4 route setters across the country to go to an event.
But
Yeah, my team uses social media quite frequently. I have an archived folder on Instagram that's just called route setting, and all the craziest things that I see that while I'm scrolling through, I just like save, and then I'll just like deploy a challenge. I'm like, hey, today we're gonna spend an hour trying to see if we can do this, and then you it breaks from the commercial monotony, which is kind of fun, and it gives the team some challenge. But again, like I think the missing component to that sometimes is that if you're just like in the dark, not knowing how they're doing it, you might not have the tools, whether that be the hold and volume resources or like the knowledge of how to expertly do it. And so it might be a miss, it might be a hit. I don't know. I think this is where like coordinating with your local climbing team, or if you've got a youth program, you can kind of like say, hey, head coach, like the setting team's going to do something crazy today. It would be sweet if you like put your athletes on it. It's like we're going to try to set it for the U15 category, like who you got, and then you can maybe even encourage the route setting team to attend the practice, so that, because I think one of the most valuable pieces is like, hey, watch the athletes experience the thing, because that might be completely different than how the climbers, or sorry, the route setters are doing the move while they're forerunning. And so I think that one-to-one, that observation piece is also crucial. And that's like a lot of the feedback that you see when you're setting for a high level event, whether that be regionals or divisionals or nationals. It's like there's some real-time assessments that are happening, from like the chief route setter and the other high level route setters, where they're watching the performance on a previous round, and then they're making like on the fly decisions of like, oh, that needs to change, or oh, like we set a test move in the qualifying round and all of a sudden we have to turn it up because they smashed it, or whoa, they're really bad at that, let's like put it back down a little bit so that they don't all get curb stomped tomorrow.
Right, well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We're now 10 minutes past. Uh, Thank you so much, John. You were so generous with your time. We really appreciate you coming and chatting and answering questions. Um, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. And I meant it. If you have questions or you want to just get some feedback, whatever, I'm happy to field those questions offline.
Perfect. Where can people reach you? Or if you want to like
My
build out-
direct email is pretty simple. It's John, John, at usaclimbing.org.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks everybody
Thanks,
for being
everyone.
here. Set your calendars for October 14. Next month we'll have Jackie Heffley talking about the future of education for route setters. And we'll have this video posted really soon, and you'll get an email from that. Send it on to the folks that you know that didn't make it. And thanks, Fox. Thanks, Justin, John, and everybody for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Scott.
everyone.
Everybody, appreciate it.